The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy Atlanta airport terminal as passengers hurried to their gates. Among them walked Dr. Amelia Rodriguez, a successful businesswoman in her mid-30s, pulling her black carry-on bag behind her. She wore comfortable jeans, a simple white blouse, and sneakers, nothing flashy or attention-grabbing. Most people would never guess she was one of the most powerful executives at Meridian Airlines. Today was special for Amelia. She had just been promoted to Vice President of Customer Relations at the airline, and this flight to Los Angeles was her first chance to experience her own company's service as a regular passenger. She had booked the ticket under her personal name, not her business account, wanting to see exactly how Meridian Airlines treated its customers when they didn't know who was watching. As she approached Gate B12, Amelia felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had worked hard for this promotion, spending countless hours improving customer service policies and training programs. Now she would finally see if all her efforts were making a real difference. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now boarding first-class passengers for Meridian Airlines Flight 447 to Los Angeles. Amelia smiled and gathered her belongings. She had treated herself to a first-class seat, figuring it was a small celebration for her promotion. She handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a friendly young man who smiled and wished her a pleasant flight. Walking down the jet bridge, Amelia felt proud. This was her airline, her company, and she was finally in a position to make real changes that would help thousands of passengers every day. The first-class cabin was spacious and elegant, with cream-colored leather seats arranged in a 2x2 configuration. Amelia found her seat 2A by the window on the left side of the plane. She placed her carry-on in the overhead bin and settled in, pulling out her phone to review some emails before takeoff. The cabin gradually filled with other first-class passengers. A businessman in an expensive suit took the seat across the aisle. An elderly couple settled in behind her, chatting quietly about their upcoming vacation. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Then she arrived. Patricia Davidson was a woman in her early 50s with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She wore large diamond earrings and carried a handbag that screamed luxury brand. Patricia worked in pharmaceutical sales and was used to getting her way in every situation. Patricia stopped directly next to Amelia's row, checking her boarding pass with a confused expression. She looked at the seat number, then at Amelia, then back at her boarding pass. Her perfectly manicured eyebrows drew together in a frown. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice carrying a tone of authority. "I think you're in my seat." Amelia looked up from her phone with a polite smile. "Oh, let me check." She pulled out her boarding pass and showed it to Patricia. "I have seat 2A. What does yours say?" Patricia barely glanced at the boarding pass. Instead, her eyes traveled up and down Amelia, taking in her casual clothes and simple appearance. "There must be some kind of mistake," she said, her voice getting louder. "I specifically requested a window seat in first class." "Well, this is my assigned seat," Amelia replied calmly, still holding up her boarding pass. "Maybe the gate agent can help you find your correct seat?" But Patricia wasn't listening. She had already made up her mind about the situation. In her world, people who looked like Amelia, especially women of color in casual clothes, didn't belong in first class. There had to be an explanation, and it probably wasn't a good one. "Look," Patricia said, her voice now carrying an edge of irritation. "I fly first class all the time. I know how these things work. Someone like you," she paused, letting her words hang in the air. "Someone like you doesn't just end up in first class by accident." The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop. Other passengers began to notice the commotion. The businessman across the aisle looked up from his newspaper. The elderly couple behind them stopped their conversation to listen. Amelia felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not sure what you mean by someone like me, but I have a valid boarding pass for this seat. If you'd like to show me your boarding pass, we can figure this out together." Patricia's face began to flush red. "Don't play dumb with me. I know exactly what's going on here. You probably used one of those affirmative action programs to get this ticket, Or maybe you're using someone else's credit card. Either way, you don't belong here. The words hit Amelia like a slap. She had heard comments like this before in her life, but never so blatantly, and certainly not on her own airline. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay professional. As an executive, she had to handle this situation carefully. "Ma'am," Amelia said, her voice still calm but firm, "I purchased this ticket legally with my own money. I'm going to ask you politely to check your own boarding pass and find your assigned seat." But Patricia was beyond reason now. The idea that this woman in casual clothes was standing up to her only fueled her anger. "I am not moving until this situation is resolved," she declared loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. "There is obviously some kind of fraud going on here, and I want it investigated immediately." Amelia noticed that other passengers were now openly staring. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed angry at Patricia's behavior. A few were even pulling out their phones. She realized this situation was escalating quickly and could become a serious problem for the airline. Her airline. She decided to try a different approach. "Why don't we call the flight attendant over?" Amelia suggested. "They can help us sort this out." "Finally, someone with sense," Patricia huffed. She immediately began looking around for a crew member, waving her hand dramatically. "Flight attendant, I need assistance over here right away." A tall, professional-looking flight attendant named Devin approached their row. He had been working for Meridian Airlines for 8 years and had seen his share of passenger disputes. "Good morning, ladies. How can I help you today?" Patricia immediately launched into her complaint. "This woman is in my seat and she's refusing to move. I specifically booked a first-class window seat and I suspect there's something fraudulent going on with her ticket." Devin looked at both boarding passes carefully. "Ma'am," he said to Patricia, "your seat is actually 4B, which is an aisle seat, 4 rows back. This passenger is correctly seated in 2A. Patricia's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "That's impossible. I specifically requested a window seat. I always fly window. There must be a mistake in your computer system." "I understand your frustration," Devin replied professionally, "but our records show you booked seat 4B 3 days ago. I'd be happy to see if there are any other window seats available, but this passenger is in her correct seat." "No," Patricia practically shouted. "I refuse to accept this. I want to speak to your supervisor immediately. This woman is obviously using a stolen credit card or fake ID. People like her don't just buy first-class tickets. I want airport security called right now." The cabin fell silent. Even the background noise of the air conditioning seemed to stop. Amelia felt every eye in first class focused on their row. She could see the shock and disgust on other passengers' faces as they realized what they were witnessing. Devin's expression remained professional, but Amelia could see the concern in his eyes. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice and return to your assigned seat. We cannot make accusations against other passengers without evidence." But Patricia was past the point of reason. She had convinced herself that she was the victim in this situation and she wasn't going to back down. "I am a paying customer and I demand satisfaction. This is exactly the kind of thing that's wrong with airlines today. You let anyone buy tickets and honest people like me have to suffer." Amelia finally spoke up, her voice cutting through Patricia's rant like a knife. "That's enough." The words came out with such authority that even Patricia stopped talking for a moment. "You have accused me of fraud, theft, and suggested I don't belong here based solely on my appearance. That is unacceptable behavior." Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She hadn't expected this kind of pushback from someone she had dismissed as unimportant. "How dare you speak to me like that? I want this woman arrested. Immediately!" And with those words, Patricia sealed her fate. What happened next would change both their lives forever. Patricia's face was now bright red, and her voice carried throughout the entire first-class cabin. Other passengers had stopped, pretending to mind their own business, and were openly watching the drama unfold. Some looked uncomfortable, others appeared angry at Patricia's behavior, and a few had their phones out, clearly recording the incident. Devin, the flight attendant, took a deep breath. In his 8 years with Meridian Airlines, he had dealt with difficult passengers before, but this situation was escalating beyond anything in his training manual. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and return to your assigned seat. We cannot delay the flight any longer." Calm down? Patricia shrieked. I will not calm down. This woman is clearly using fraudulent documents, and you're all just standing here, letting it happen. She pointed an accusatory finger at Amelie. Hey, look at her. Look at what she's wearing. Does she look like someone who can afford a first-class ticket? Amelia remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap, but inside, she was fighting to control her anger. She had worked her entire career to reach her current position, overcoming obstacles and prejudices that Patricia couldn't even imagine. Now, on what should have been a celebratory flight, she was being subjected to the exact kind of discrimination she had spent years fighting against in the airline industry. Ma'am, Devon said firmly to Patricia, making accusations based on someone's appearance is not appropriate. Both passengers have valid boarding passes, and I need you to take your assigned seat now. But Patricia was beyond reasoning. She had convinced herself that she was fighting some kind of righteous battle. No, I refuse to be treated this way. I am a platinum frequent flyer with this airline. I spend thousands of dollars a year on tickets, and this is how you treat me? She pulled out her phone and began dialing. Fine. If you won't do anything about this, I'll call someone who will. I'm calling airport security right now. The businessman across the aisle finally spoke up. Lady, you're making a fool of yourself. Just go to your own seat and leave her alone. Patricia whirled around to face him. Stay out of this. This doesn't concern you. Then she turned back to her phone call. Yes, hello? I need airport security at gate B12 immediately. There's a woman here using fraudulent documents to steal a first-class seat. Amelia could hear the person on the other end of the phone asking questions. Patricia's answers became more elaborate with each response. She's being threatening and aggressive. Patricia lied into the phone. She's making me feel unsafe. I think she might be using a stolen credit card or fake ID. She definitely doesn't belong in first class. The elderly woman sitting behind Amelia leaned forward. Excuse me, dear, she said to Amelia, but that woman is completely out of line. You haven't done anything wrong. Her husband nodded in agreement. We've been watching this whole thing. You've been nothing but polite and reasonable. Patricia overheard the comments and spun around again. Are you all conspiring against me? This is unbelievable. Honest, law-abiding citizens can't even fly safely anymore. She ended her call to security and immediately started another one. This time she was calling 911. Yes, I need police at the airport, she said dramatically. There's a woman here who I believe is committing fraud, and the airline staff is refusing to help me. Devon looked helplessly toward the front of the plane. This situation was spiraling completely out of control, and he was running out of options. The flight was already delayed, and other passengers were becoming increasingly agitated. Amelia finally stood up. She was tired of being talked about like she wasn't there. Ma'am, she said to Patricia, I'm going to ask you one more time to stop making false accusations about me. False accusations? Patricia laughed bitterly. The evidence is right in front of everyone's face. You're dressed like you work at a coffee shop, not like someone who flies first class. And now you're trying to intimidate me. I am not trying to intimidate anyone, Amelia replied calmly. I'm simply asking you to treat me with basic human dignity. Human dignity? Patricia's voice reached a new level of hysteria. What about my dignity? I'm a respected professional being victimized by airline fraud, and everyone is acting like I'm the problem. She turned to address the other passengers directly. Can't you all see what's happening here? This airline is letting people use fake tickets, and when honest customers complain, they get attacked. The businessman across the aisle shook his head in disgust. Lady, the only person attacking anyone here is you. That woman has been nothing but polite while you've been acting like a complete maniac. Don't you dare call me a maniac. Patricia shouted. I am fighting for what's right. I'm standing up for honest people everywhere. A younger passenger in the row behind spoke up. You're not fighting for anything except your own prejudices. We can all see exactly what this is about. Patricia's eyes widened with indignation. How dare you? This has nothing to do with what you're implying. This is about fraud and airline security. But her protests were becoming less convincing by the minute. Other passengers were openly expressing their disgust with her behavior. "This is embarrassing," muttered a woman in row 3. "I can't believe we have to listen to this." "Someone needs to remove her from the plane," added another passenger. Patricia was now completely surrounded by disapproving faces, but instead of backing down, she doubled down on her accusations. She began live streaming the incident on her social media account, holding up her phone to record herself. "I'm Patricia Davidson," she announced to her phone camera, "and I want everyone to see how paying customers are being treated on Meridian Airlines. I am being victimized by someone who clearly doesn't belong in first class, and the airline staff is doing nothing to help me." She turned the camera toward Amelia. "Look at this person. Does she look like someone who can afford a $1,500 ticket? Obviously, there's fraud involved here, but the airline is more concerned with political correctness than passenger safety." Amelia raised her hand to block the camera. "Please stop recording me without my permission." "See?" Patricia said triumphantly to her camera. "She doesn't want to be filmed because she knows she's guilty. This is exactly the kind of person who's ruining air travel for honest Americans." Devin was frantically trying to contact his supervisor while managing the increasingly chaotic situation. The other passengers were getting more agitated by the minute, and he could see people in the economy section craning their necks to see what was happening. "Ma'am," he said desperately to Patricia, "I really need you to end this live stream and return to your seat. We have other passengers waiting to depart." "I will not be silenced," Patricia declared, still filming. "Everyone needs to see how this airline treats its loyal customers. They're more concerned with protecting criminals than serving paying passengers." Amelia pulled out her own phone and began recording Patricia's behavior. If this woman was going to make accusations and live stream lies about her, she needed her own documentation of what was really happening. "Now she's filming me," Patricia shrieked when she noticed Amelia's phone. "This is harassment. This is intimidation. Where is airport security?" As if summoned by her words, 2 airport security officers appeared at the entrance to the first-class cabin. Patricia immediately rushed toward them, her phone still recording. "Thank goodness you're here," she exclaimed. "I want this woman arrested immediately for fraud and harassment." The security officers looked confused as they surveyed the scene. They saw a calm, well-dressed woman sitting quietly in her seat, and a hysterical passenger waving a phone around and making wild accusations. "Ma'am," one of the officers said to Patricia, "can you please explain what's happening here?" Patricia launched into her story, embellishing it further with each sentence. According to her version, Amelia had stolen her seat, threatened her, tried to intimidate her, and was probably using stolen credit cards to purchase fraudulent tickets. The security officer turned to Devin. "What's the situation from the airline's perspective?" Devin looked exhausted. "Both passengers have valid boarding passes. This passenger," he gestured to Patricia, "is refusing to go to her assigned seat and has been making accusations against the other passenger for the past 20 minutes. "I want to see both boarding passes," the officer said. As the boarding passes were examined once again, Patricia continued her live stream commentary. "You can see how they're all covering for each other. This is exactly what's wrong with our society today. Honest people get no respect while criminals are protected." But the security officers were professionals who dealt with these situations regularly. It was becoming clear to them who the real problem was in this scenario. What Patricia didn't realize was that her own live stream was about to become evidence of her behavior. And in just a few minutes, everything she thought she knew about this situation was going to change completely. The 2 security officers stood in the first-class cabin, trying to make sense of the chaotic scene before them. Officer Johnson, a veteran with 15 years of airport security experience, had seen every type of passenger dispute imaginable. His partner, Officer Chen, was newer but equally professional in handling difficult situations. Patricia was still, holding her phone, live streaming every moment while speaking rapidly to her audience. "You can see how long this is taking," she said to her camera. "They're obviously trying to figure out how to cover this up, but I won't be silenced." Officer Johnson examined both boarding passes carefully, comparing them to the passengers' identification documents. Everything was clearly in order. Patricia Davidson was assigned to seat 4B, and Amelia Rodriguez was correctly seated in 2A. "Ma'am," Officer Johnson said to Patricia, Your boarding pass shows seat 4B. This passenger is in her correct seat. Patricia's face flushed even redder. That's impossible. I always request window seats. Someone changed my reservation to help her. She pointed accusingly at Amelia. This is a conspiracy. Just then, a commotion arose from the front of the aircraft. The cockpit door opened, and Captain Rodriguez emerged. Ladies and gentlemen, Amelia said in a clear professional voice, I want to apologize for the disruption to your flight today. My name is Amelia Rodriguez, and I am the Vice President of Customer Relations for Meridian Airlines. A murmur of amazement rippled through the cabin. Several passengers pulled out their phones to capture this unexpected moment. What you witnessed today is unfortunately not uncommon in air travel, Amelia continued. Passengers sometimes face discrimination based on their appearance, race, or perceived economic status. However, I want you to know that this behavior is absolutely not tolerated by our airline. The elderly woman from row 4 raised her hand. Dear, how did you stay so calm through all of that? I would have lost my temper completely. Amelia smiled warmly. I've faced situations like this before in my life. When someone attacks you based on prejudice, responding with anger only gives them ammunition. Staying calm and professional is always the best approach. The businessman across the aisle shook his head in amazement. I have to say, watching you handle that was like a masterclass in conflict resolution. That woman made herself look completely foolish while you never lost. Your composure. Captain Rodriguez, who had remained in the cabin to ensure the situation was fully resolved, spoke up. This is exactly why Ms. Rodriguez was promoted to her current position. She's dedicated her career to improving the travel experience for all passengers. A younger passenger in row 3 asked, What's going to happen to that woman? Will there be consequences for her behavior? Amelia nodded seriously. Absolutely. Making false accusations, disrupting a flight, and discriminatory behavior all violate our passenger conduct policies. She'll be facing several consequences beyond just missing this flight. At the front of the plane, Patricia was still arguing with the security officers as they waited for her to gather her belongings from the overhead bin. Her live stream continued, but her audience was growing increasingly hostile. I demand to speak to someone in charge, she shouted, oblivious to the irony that she had just been removed from a plane by the very person in charge of customer relations. Officer Johnson remained patient but firm. Ma'am, you need to end your live stream and exit the aircraft. You can file any complaints through the proper channels once we're off the plane. This is a violation of my civil rights, Patricia declared. I'm being discriminated against for being white. A flight attendant at the front of the plane couldn't help but shake her head. In her 10 years with the airline, she had never seen someone so completely misunderstand their own situation. Back in first class, other passengers were sharing their own experiences with Amelia. The elderly gentleman from row 4 spoke up. My wife and I have been flying for 40 years and we've seen behavior like this before. It's always shocked us how some people treat others. His wife nodded in agreement. What impressed us most was how the crew handled it. That young flight attendant, Devon, was very professional even when that woman was being completely unreasonable. Devon, who had been standing nearby, looked surprised to be mentioned. Thank you, ma'am. We receive excellent training from Ms. Rodriguez's department on how to handle these situations. Amelia smiled at Devon. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You remained calm, followed procedures, and protected the safety and dignity of all passengers. I'll make sure your supervisor hears about your professional handling of this situation. Devon beamed with pride. It wasn't every day that an airline executive personally complimented his work. A passenger from row 5 called out, Ms. Rodriguez, can I ask you something? Do you often fly as a regular passenger to see how things are working? This was actually my first time doing it, Amelia admitted. I just got promoted to this position, and I wanted to experience our service from a customer's perspective. I certainly wasn't expecting anything like this to happen. Well, you definitely got a real test of your policies today, laughed the businessman. Meanwhile, Patricia's situation was going from bad to worse. As she finally gathered her belongings, her phone battery died, cutting off her live stream abruptly. She fumbled for a charger, desperate to continue broadcasting what she still believed was her victimization. "My phone died," she announced to the security officers as if this was some kind of conspiracy. "They probably blocked my signal." Officer Chen exchanged a look with his partner. They had dealt with paranoid passengers before, but Patricia's complete disconnect from reality was impressive even by their standards. As they escorted her off the plane, Patricia made one final attempt to rally support from the passengers in economy class. "Everyone, look what they're doing to me. I tried to stop a crime and now I'm being thrown off the plane." But the economy passengers had heard everything that happened in first class. Many of them had been following the incident on social media, where clips of Patricia's live stream were already going viral. Instead of support, she received disapproving stares and shaking heads. One passenger called out, "Good riddance," as she passed. Another said loudly, "That's what happens when you act like that." Patricia's face turned red with humiliation as she realized that even the economy passengers were against her. This wasn't how she had imagined this day going at all. Back on the plane, Amelia was conducting an impromptu Q&A session with the first-class passengers. Someone asked about airline policies regarding discrimination. "We have a zero-tolerance policy," Amelia explained. "Any passenger who engages in discriminatory behavior toward other passengers or crew members can be removed from the flight and banned from future travel with us." "How long is the ban?" asked a curious passenger. "It depends on the severity of the incident," Amelia replied. "For behavior like we witnessed today, including false accusations and disrupting the flight, the ban could be permanent." This revelation caused a stir among the passengers. They hadn't realized that Patricia might never be allowed to fly with Meridian Airlines again. Captain Rodriguez announced over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We'll be departing for Los Angeles shortly. Flight attendants, please prepare for departure." As the plane finally began to push back from the gate, Amelia settled back into her seat. She pulled out her tablet and began making notes about the incident. This experience would definitely influence her future policies and training programs. The businessman across the aisle leaned over. "Are you actually going to work during the flight after everything that just happened?" Amelia laughed. "What just happened is going to help me do my job better. Every experience like this teaches us something about how to improve our service." "That's an amazingly positive attitude," he replied. "Most people would be upset or angry after being treated like that." "Being angry wouldn't help anyone," Amelia said. "But using this experience to prevent it from happening to other passengers? That's something worthwhile." As the plane took off, none of the passengers could have imagined how far-reaching the consequences of Patricia's behavior would be. Her live stream was already spreading across social media platforms, and the story was just beginning to unfold. What Patricia had intended, as evidence of her victimization, was about to become a viral sensation for completely different reasons. The internet was about to deliver its own form of justice, and Patricia Davidson was going to learn that actions have consequences in ways she never expected. 3 days after the incident, Patricia Davidson woke up to a nightmare that was entirely of her own making. Her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications, but not the kind she wanted to see. Her live stream from the airplane had exploded across social media platforms, but she wasn't being celebrated as a hero fighting fraud. Instead, she had become the perfect example of everything wrong with entitled discriminatory behavior. The video had been shared over 50,000 times on various platforms. News websites had picked up the story with headlines like, "Woman demands arrest of airline executive on her own plane," and "Racist passenger gets reality check at 30,000 feet." The comment sections were brutal, with thousands of people expressing their disgust at Patricia's behavior. Patricia sat in her living room, scrolling through her phone in disbelief. "This isn't what happened," she muttered to herself. "They're twisting everything around." But the video didn't lie. Her own livestream clearly showed her making discriminatory assumptions, refusing to believe Amelia belonged in first class, and demanding her arrest based solely on her appearance. Even worse, it captured the moment when her entire world crumbled as Captain Rodriguez revealed Amelia's true identity. Meanwhile, at Meridian Airlines headquarters in Chicago, Amelia was in her office reviewing the incident report. Her assistant knocked on the door and entered with a concerned expression. "Ms. Rodriguez, I have some updates on the Patricia Davidson situation," her assistant said, placing a folder on Amelia's desk. Amelia looked up from her computer. "What's the latest?" "Well, the good news is that the story is being covered very positively for the airline. Every news report is praising how professionally you and the crew handled the situation. We're getting calls from other airlines asking about our training programs." Amelia nodded. "And the not-so-good news? Ms. Davidson has been trying to contact local news stations with her version of the story. She's claiming she was set up and that you somehow tricked her into revealing her true character, as she puts it." Amelia sighed. Even after everything that had happened, Patricia still couldn't accept responsibility for her actions. "Any news stations interested in her story?" "Not really. Her own live stream is pretty damning evidence. Most reporters are treating her claims as delusional. Oh, and there's more. Her employer, MedTech Solutions, has launched an internal investigation into her conduct." This caught Amelia's attention. "Her employer?" "Yes, apparently several clients saw the video and called to complain. They don't want to do business with someone who behaves that way. The company issued a statement saying they're deeply disturbed by her actions and are reviewing her employment status." Across town, Patricia was experiencing the consequences firsthand. She had been called into her supervisor's office at MedTech Solutions that morning. The meeting didn't go well. Patricia, her boss, Mr. Williams, had said, "We've received over 20 calls from clients who saw that video. Some of our biggest accounts are threatening to cancel their contracts if we don't take action." Patricia tried to defend herself. "It was a misunderstanding. I was trying to prevent fraud." "Patricia, I watched the video myself. You made assumptions about another passenger based on her appearance and clothing. You accused her of crimes without any evidence. This goes against everything our company stands for." "But I didn't know. She was an executive," Patricia protested. "That's exactly the problem," Mr. Williams replied. "You treated her badly because you thought she wasn't important. That tells us everything we need to know about your character." The meeting ended with Patricia being placed on unpaid administrative leave, pending a full investigation. Back at the airport, Officer Johnson was filing his final report on the incident. In his 15 years of airport security, he had seen plenty of passenger disputes, but this one stood out for several reasons. The subject continued to make false accusations even after being presented with clear evidence that she was wrong, he wrote in his report. She showed no remorse for her behavior and seemed genuinely surprised that there would be consequences for her actions. The report would become part of Patricia's permanent record with airport security, making future travel more complicated even if other airlines allowed her to fly. At Meridian Airlines, the story was having a very different impact. Amelia had turned the negative experience into a company-wide learning opportunity. She was using the incident to develop new training materials for flight crews and gate agents. "This situation showed us both our strengths and areas where we can improve," she explained during a company meeting. "Our crew handled the immediate situation professionally, but we need to ensure all employees are prepared for these types of discrimination incidents." Devon, the flight attendant who had dealt with Patricia's initial complaints, was invited to share his experience with the training team. "The hardest part," he explained, "was staying professional when she kept making those accusations. Ms. Rodriguez's composure really helped me stay calm. The training program that emerged from the incident would eventually be adopted by airlines across the industry. What started as a terrible experience for Amelia became a catalyst for positive change throughout commercial aviation." Meanwhile, Patricia's social media presence was crumbling. Her Facebook and Instagram accounts were flooded with negative comments. People were sharing the video and asking their friends, "Can you believe someone actually behaved like this?" She tried to post her own version of events, but every time she shared her story, more people would respond with clips from her own live stream showing exactly what had really happened. "I was discriminated against for being white," she posted on Facebook. The responses were swift and merciless. "You discriminated against someone for being Latina and wearing casual clothes. Your own video shows you being the aggressor." You embarrassed yourself and your family with this behavior. Patricia's attempts to play the victim were falling on deaf ears. The evidence was too clear, and public opinion was firmly against her. 2 weeks after the incident, Amelia received an unexpected phone call. It was from the CEO of Meridian Airlines. "Amelia, I wanted to personally congratulate you on how you handled that situation," the CEO said. "The board of directors was incredibly impressed with your professionalism under pressure." "Thank you, sir. It was certainly an unexpected test of our policies." "Well, you passed with flying colors. In fact, we'd like to expand your role. We're creating a new position, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience and Inclusion. We want you to lead our efforts industry-wide." Amelia was stunned. The worst day of her recent memory was turning into the best career news she had ever received. The promotion was announced company-wide the following week. The announcement mentioned her exceptional leadership during a difficult passenger incident, and her commitment to dignity and respect for all travelers. Patricia, meanwhile, was learning that actions have consequences in the digital age. Her employer had completed their investigation and terminated her employment. The official reason was conduct unbecoming of company values and damage to client relationships. She tried to find new employment, but potential employers were Googling her name and finding the viral video. In interview after interview, she had to explain her behavior on the airplane. Most companies decided they didn't want to risk hiring someone with such a public record of discriminatory behavior. 3 months later, Amelia was featured on the cover of Aviation Weekly magazine with the headline, "Leading Change: How One Executive Turned Discrimination into Industry Reform." The article detailed how her experience had led to new industry standards for handling passenger discrimination. The training programs she developed were being implemented by airlines across the country. Flight attendants were learning to recognize discriminatory behavior earlier and respond more effectively. Gate agents were being trained to support passengers who face prejudice. Every negative experience can be turned into something positive if we're willing to learn from it, Amelia was quoted as saying in the article. Patricia's story took a different path. 6 months after the incident, she was working part-time at a call center, still unable to find employment in her field. She had been forced to sell her house and move in with her sister. She still occasionally posted on social media, insisting she had been wronged, but fewer and fewer people paid attention. The internet had moved on to other stories, leaving Patricia to deal with the long-term consequences of her choices. The final irony came a year later, when Patricia tried to book a flight with a different airline for a family wedding. During the e-booking process, her name was flagged in the airline industry's shared database of disruptive passengers. She was informed that she would need special approval to fly, a process that could take weeks. As she hung up the phone after being denied the flight, Patricia finally understood that her 5 minutes of anger on an airplane had changed her life forever. Meanwhile, Amelia Rodriguez was being honored at an industry conference for her contributions to making air travel more inclusive and respectful for everyone. The woman who had tried to destroy someone's day because of her prejudices had instead created a catalyst for positive change. Sometimes justice comes not from punishment, but from turning hate into hope and discrimination into progress. In the end, both women got exactly what they deserved.